Hello, and welcome to the Eco D2C podcast, where we break down the growth strategies behind successful natural and eco-focused companies. My name is Luke, and I'm here with Steve Demos, the founder of White Wave. Steve, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, thank you.
So, Steve, before we get started, before we get into business, can you tell us something interesting about yourself that most people don't know?
Yeah, when I was 22, I hitchhiked from Europe to Asia and stayed in India for 4 years. How's that work?
That that's pretty good. How long did it take you to hitchhike from Europe all the way down to? Did you hitchhike from Europe to India?
I hitchhiked from Istanbul
Mm-hmm.
to through to Afghanistan. That took
Mm-hmm.
a couple months. It wasn't that it was that hard getting the rides. Hitchhiking, it was just there was a lot of places to stop off and take a look at. We stayed in there for months,
Mm-hmm.
and then down into Pakistan and across to India.
Amazing. I'm a big fan of hitchhiking myself, but I can't say I've ever done that large a stretch. Um, it's in my long-term goals to do a longer trip like that. But yeah, it just sounds amazing.
Well, the hitchhiking was done on the tops of trucks. We actually sat on I and my partner sat on the tops of trucks wrapped in blankets. We never really got into the cabs of the trucks. So it was a rather
Really?
exotic way to see the Mid East and down into the subcontinent. Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine. I can't say I've ever ridden on top of a truck. I've gotten picked up by a tour bus and people with VW campers and some other interesting rides, but not on top of something yet. Um, so for those who are
I,
unfamiliar, can you? Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead
Um,
and try it.
yeah, I just might. I'll have to hitchhike through the Middle East to see. For those who are unfamiliar, can you tell us a little bit about White Wave?
White Wave was started in 1977 as an artisan tofu company. When small was beautiful, but evidently highly unprofitable, and
Mm-hmm.
we turned it into a soy foods company, making tofu, tempeh, and seitan were our primary products.
Mm-hmm.
We did this trying to popularize tofu for approximately 17 to 18 years when it was the most hated food in the United States. So my mantra at the time was "Hate me harder." Um, and then we launched a product called Silk Soy Milk, and Silk was the rocket ship that took us into outer space. So we stayed with that for a number of years, 8 years, and then ultimately sold it to a larger company, which we drove it even further because they gave us the reins to drive it. So that's the story of White Wave.
Right, right,
Well,
and
there's a
um,
little bit more to it. Once the big company took over, it was ultimately sold to Danone
mm-hmm.
of France for some enormous amount of billions of dollars. And
Mm-hmm.
it is now probably the world's largest producer of plant-based non-dairy beverages.
Yeah, no, you guys really set the industry standard. And I'm super excited to get into talking about how some of those early days looked, how things looked before and after. Silk Soy Milk really took off and became the brand that all of us know today. Um, but as we were talking before, and as you mentioned in a couple of other podcasts and pieces that people have done on you, I would love just to hear a little bit about right livelihood and how that informs. It sounds like everything that you did in the company and the values that the team had and in the product itself.
You know, we're going to go right back to the first question you asked me, and that's talk about something that somebody didn't know. The reality was that long stay in India introduced me to a lot of Hindu and Buddhist philosophy. And
Hmm.
in the studies that I undertook while I was there, I came across the Eightfold Noble Path that Buddha had articulated. And in that one step was right livelihood, the description of right livelihood. Well,
Hmm.
I came out of the 60s when business was evil. It was raping the planet. It was exploiting people. It was everything negative. There can be some comparison to business today there. But I was born into a capitalist family and have it in my DNA, but left
Hmm.
the United States on a one-way ticket to India because I couldn't justify business to myself or my peer group until I came across Right Livelihood. And Right Livelihood was the missing, showed me the missing piece in business, and that is personal morality or personal
Hmm.
belief in something that your intent is to, and your intent and your product are to improve the world without bringing it any harm. No harm to the world, no harm to the value chain, no harm to animals, no harm. So we left, Pat Calhoun and I left India after on and off 4 years there, 2 weeks after we had really discovered this and had an epiphany, with the intent of coming back to the United States and demonstrating a higher, what we call the higher order of capitalism, right livelihood. That capitalism being probably the most powerful force on the planet, if it was changed for the good, if people
Hmm.
actually engaged in livelihood by the virtue that they believed in, then we felt we were contributing to a more harmonious and peaceful planet. So the whole intent behind White Wave was not tofu and was not soy milk. It was right livelihood. It was the intent
Hmm.
to show that there is a harmony when you choose intentionally a product and a path which causes no harm to anybody and brings benefit to everybody and everything it touches.
Hmm. I know I'm not alone in saying that. I immensely appreciate your pioneering really in the field of conscious capitalism. There's a lot of the things that you hear entrepreneurs and other people involved in the natural space saying, like you guys were some of the forerunners of that, and it's just fascinating to hear some of those stories about what this looked like in some of the early days. Um, I'd like to talk growth for a little bit here. You said that you had the artisan shop for years, but I also know that you guys were extremely well positioned to take advantage um, of the market when the FDA came out with their announcement of soy being, and correct me if I'm misspeaking here, but the FDA came out with an announcement that soy was a legitimate uh, help me out here for something reducing cholesterol.
Yeah, that's correct. It was permitted to be advertised as a bona fide health claim. A
Right.
health claim in the United States is regulated by FDA. So you can't go saying, hey, a product will do X to improve your health unless it's been approved by FDA and verified by science.
Right.
So at the time, we got notification, and this was probably in the early 90s, that we were going to be able to advertise and promote natural soy as a bona fide cholesterol reducer.
Ex-
This motivated us highly to get our
mhm.
products positioned in advance of this on the shelves of the supermarkets in the United States.
I
So
hear you.
with that notification that we heard from FDA, we began what you would consider to be quite a race to
Hmm.
uh, be placed and positioned everywhere we could in the U.S.
Right. And I have some questions for you about that time period, but I'd like to take a step back before this was on your radar. Um, was it Were there any moments of growth that really stood out in those early days when you were running your the shop, or was it pretty small until there was all this prep for when the FDA was going to make this announcement, and then you guys were enormously well positioned? It sounds like it was a pretty long, hard slog to develop the company to get to the point where it was able to take advantage of everything that came in that moment and after it. Are there any are there any moments that stand out along that early journey of being able to get into that position?
It was more than a long slog. We were quite a bit ahead of the curve. Our
Hmm.
observation at the time was that there was a rising tide of interest in plant-based foods, primarily because of the resources that were being exhausted by animal husbandry, animal farming, and that would be water, production of methane, use of petroleum fuels, et cetera. So this is exactly what we're talking about today. It's
Hmm.
very obvious in just about every week, somewhere in some print, you're going to find a discussion of this. But remember, this was 1977 that we started this. So we had that and a vegan delicatessen called the Cow of China at the time, which was
Hmm.
basically our experimental launch pad to find out, well, what does the population really want? Um,
Hmm.
there were no monumental moments. It was declared the most hated food in the United States by the LA Times at one point, from a poll that they did. That tofu was hated more than any other food. So we were basically swimming upstream with the concept of this is a product that its time will come, and we knew it. We knew that we were working for the future, though we weren't looking for landslides of booming interest or new sales. It was inch by inch,
Hmm.
foot by foot, yard by yard. It was a long haul of introducing the U.S. to vegetable-based proteins.
Gotcha. How did you initially get your distribution beyond just the storefront?
Well, we have a cute little story about that one. You know, the goal of any small company is to get their product placed in the mainstream and then appeal to the mainstream. Well, that's the supermarket chains of the United States. In
Hmm.
our area, it was a Kroger subsidiary called King Supers, and there was also Safeway and Albertsons here. So I went in and made a presentation to the buyer at King Supers, and I took tofu in a plastic bag with a twist tie and said, I really want to distribute this product in your supermarkets. And he almost fell off his chair laughing at me, saying, well, here's the label, and what are you going to sell this in? So I went home and I put it into really what you would consider one of those carry out Chinese food carry out cartons, or something that you used to carry a goldfish in if you wanted at the county fair, and put the tofu in a plastic bag, took it back with a label on it. And he said, yeah, really. And he said, I'll give you two stores in Boulder and we'll see whether your product can stand up against the competition, because there was a Japanese company that was selling tofu in the stores already. So
Okay.
we went in with a fully organic product in 1977 and put our label on it. And then I instructed our employee base, which, you know, there was probably 6 or 8 of us at the time, that every day I wanted the employees to go out and buy tofu off the shelf, and I paid them to do this. And for the next month, um, the employees bought all the tofu on the shelf at King Super, so that when I went in for the review, the buyer said, this is really moving well. We're going to give you the entire chain and distribute it for you out of our warehouse. Well, this is the holy grail.
Hmm.
Um, they gave us, I think it was 50 some stores at the time. It may have been more than that. And off we went, because King Supers, Safeway, and Albertsons are head on competitors in the Colorado market. And
Hmm.
once we landed King Supers, then the dominoes started falling, and we ended up with city markets up in the mountains, and we ended up with the Safeway chain that went out onto the plains into the Midwest. And we just started picking up stores over the next year or two that made the critical volume that we needed to exist as a company.
So let me ask you a question about that, because you know, in your hometown, you have your employees going out and helping you out, with the numbers there. But was there anything that was done to help spur sales in some of these other locations? Because I imagine you didn't have a fleet of people across the United States to go out and buy your product for you, that could be compensated for afterwards.
No, I wish I did. No. Yeah, don't I wish? I mean, one caveat, one follow up to that last anecdote is the question is, what did the employees do with the tofu? Because to this day, I don't know whether they brought it back and gave it to the family or took it home. So, so that will remain unanswered. But the direct answer to your question is, wherever we could do in-store demos, our mission was to launch tofu into the average American diet. Our mission statement was, through the principles of right livelihood, we will
Hmm.
fully integrate the use of natural soy into the average American diet. That
Sure.
was our mission. That's word for word what it was. So we would do this by, we weren't couponing. I mean, you don't coupon something that somebody hates. You
Right.
actually have to go in and educate them and show them how to use it and what to do with it. I think one of the problems that the early tofu manufacturing community, I and all of my fellow companies around the United States, we didn't introduce it with fixed uses. We introduced it with, you can use this as an ingredient in virtually anything where protein is found.
Hmm.
There is no food that you can use like silly putty that way. So we went and we made tofu meatballs, we made tuna salad, we made missing egg salad, we made stir fries, we made curries, we made everything possible out of tofu so that
Hmm.
we could convince people to purchase it. Yes, we gave them recipe pads. Yes, we gave them coupons, but that was all done at in-store demos, and that's how we supported the product at the time. And that was almost a requirement of the supermarkets going in. What are you going to do to support this? We're going to pay for in-store demos.
Hmm. And so, were you guys traveling around? Did you guys have a team or an agency that you outsourced to help you with those demos? Because, I mean, a lot of times with products, especially the kind of product that you're talking about at the time that you guys were selling it, like there's a significant education hurdle to face even when hiring people on to sell it for you.
Oh, you're absolutely correct. In the beginning, in the first number of years, it was a regional product, and we would send our own people out to do this around the state, or have,
Hmm.
people of similar lifestyle persuasion. They were ready, willing, and able to not only make a living, but to promote tofu, because it was almost the holy grail of the time for the
Mm.
far left of center. As time went on, we began developing different products: savory baked tofu, Chinese baked tofu, tofu that was ready to heat and serve. And it was a lot easier to demo these products right off the shelf because they were ready to eat or ready to heat. Um, and we didn't have as much training to do with the demo crowd. It would have been virtually impossible to train the average American demo person out there on how to promote tofu. That would have
Right.
been a joke. So that's why it was such a slow process. I mean, we're talking 17 years here. This is not
Hmm.
17 years, an overnight success in 17 years.
For sure. I imagine though, I mean, for you to remain with that much distribution across the country, I imagine that, um, I mean, that sounds like a hell of a ride, to be honest. But I imagine that there must have been a certain kind of strategy that you guys had dialed in to, at least keep afloat and present in a lot of these stores. Like, where did some of the population sort of catch on to this food that so many people hated, or did you really just have to keep stimulating it over and over and over again, for 17 years straight?
I'm going to reflect back to the culture and the people of the late 60s.
Okay.
And they were, hippies, the dropouts, and the flower children, but they
Hmm.
all are of the same persuasion. We're going to go vegetarian. We're going to go natural. We're going to go organic. We're moving back to the earth. I
Hmm.
mean, this was percentage of the youth at that time. And it wasn't
Right.
a small percentage. It was a significant enough percentage to affect a war that was being fought in Asia.
Mm-hmm.
So, it became the carrying flag of food of the era, much the
Mm-hmm.
same as the word plant protein is the term of the day right now. The
Mm-hmm.
term of the day was this enigma called tofu, and it
Mm-hmm.
represented what we called the counterculture. So there was a rising tide of interest in the product, and we were there to meet it. Was it a large rising tide? Absolutely not. It
Mm-hmm.
was the beginnings of what we're looking at today. But
Right.
it was there and it was large enough to support a small business. We
Gotcha.
never thought we never thought that soy was going to become mainstream. It was our goal, it was our target, but I honestly thought I was working for my grandchildren to see something like this because the burden of informing and educating a country, a
Mm-hmm.
consumer, about a new food is a heavy burden. Usually that's done with enormous advertising campaigns and resources, and our industry had nothing. We all started as craftsmen.
Right. Right. So you guys effectively tapped into, I don't want to call it a cult following, but definitely, I suppose, uh, and correct me if I'm wrong, but what I'm gleaning here is the way to sell a product that everybody hates is to find the small contingent that absolutely loves it.
That's absolutely correct. We found what we'll call the first movers, the early adopters, and these
Mm-hmm.
people are passionate. The reason that they're coming towards the product is they believe in the product as much as we believed in the product. So, with it available, there became a tremendous positive advocacy for, hey, this is out there, and I mean, it was literally a camaraderie. This is part of us. It wasn't a cult, but it was a culture. It was a
Right.
subculture. That subculture has grown to a very significant percentage of people in the United States today. But
It
at that
has.
time, it was well, any city that had strong anti-war protests was probably a great city to sell tofu in at that time.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned a moment ago how much of a joke it would have been to try to train the average American to do a demo for this. Back in those days. Um, how did you find the individuals that were right to demo your product?
For the most part, the early adopters came towards us. I mean, it
Really?
wasn't hard to find demo representatives because there was a passion surrounding this change in diet. I mean, we weren't living in the 60s, we were the 60s. And
Mm-hmm.
we were living and breathing, still are, living and breathing the philosophy and the values of that time. And it had a lot to do with we're going to correct things that we thought were inappropriate for sustaining the planet. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
this is so contemporary, but remember the era, and there were a lot of people who believed in this. So we would
Mm-hmm.
have people come in looking for jobs, trying to. I had people wanting to apprentice to learn how to make tofu. I mean, it was
Mm.
a craft, and it was coming of age. And
Mhm.
the demo people were just as committed to it as we were.
That's amazing. Um, okay, so you guys are humming along. Um, you've got, pretty wide distribution, in retail, enough to support, the small business, as you said. And then how did you guys hear that the FDA was gonna pass this rule? How did you have a finger on that pulse?
The the industry itself organized itself around something called the Soy Crafters Association of North America. There were
Mm.
270, I believe, companies that started within the 2-year period that I started in,
Mhm.
all around the country. And again, it would be Ann Arbor, Berkeley, Ashland, you name it. If there was an anti-war movement there, there was probably a tofu company there.
Mhm.
The tofu uh, uh, trade group, if you will, was in constant communication and helping each other with what was going on. FDA, we had a connection into FDA because we were starting to use words that attracted their attention, such as when we started using the word milk. Now, milk is a protected, identified word in that was passed through legislation, but we used the word soy in front of it, and the dairy industry went bonkers on it.
Yeah.
So they went after the FDA to have us stop this. We
Hmm.
lobbied the FDA that, you got coconut milk and you got milk of magnesia. What are you talking about? So we were in connection, we were in contact with the government at that time, and we were attempting to initiate the sale of tofu in the school systems as an alternative protein for the kids. So we had a direct connection with government as a trade association is the simple answer to your question.
Hmm. It sounds like there's a fair amount of tofu competition at the time, but that you guys managed to remain collaborative instead of cutthroat. Is that
We
correct,
used
or am
to
I
say we
oversimplifying?
party. No, you're not oversimplifying. We used to say we party with the competition, and we did. Um, it was a very congenial industry because we were all out to change the planet. Nobody was
Mhm.
working for the money. There was no money. It was a craftsman's industry.
Mhm.
So we were all working for the spirit of initiating change and positivity. Um,
Mhm.
so nobody wanted to drive anybody out of business. Everybody accepted everybody in their region. We
Mhm.
happened to tap into a distributor. At that time, it was called Rainbow Distributing. Now it's part of UNFI, the world's largest natural distributor. And we started getting our products shipped out nationally to whether it would be the West Coast or the East Coast or all over. And we became a dominant player in the industry because we scaled up, built the factories, as well as a couple other companies. There was probably three of us that scaled to the point where we were national players in the natural products industry and then
Mhm.
slowly entered into the mainstream. The mainstream never took on organic tofu.
Right.
That was left to a later soy product. The natural products industry rallied around it. We actually started a vegetarian cuisine center in the natural products stores with all the products they were making so that we could attract the consumer's attention to a special space in the store that was selling vegetable-based proteins.
Okay. And what do you think allowed you in a crowded space with a limited market? What do you think allowed White Wave to stay one of the top tofu producers in the United States?
We never quit making new product and trying to find the entry point into the consumer's mouth and wallet. We wanted to be part of their lifestyle. And very few people will ever sit down and eat a raw block of tofu. So they didn't know what to do with it. The descriptor for tofu at the time was it doesn't have a taste, it's a funny texture, I don't know how to use it, it's kind of weird.
Mhm.
So our responsibility as manufacturers were to familiarize the American consumer with, well, this is what you can do with it. So we started investing in conveyorized ovens and a number of different types of equipment so that we could process our own product into finished goods. We ended up
Mhm.
with probably, I don't know, 20 different products made out of tofu at the time, and
Mhm.
we organized them all in the store. At the time, if you walked into a natural food store and said, "Where's your vegetarian foods?" they would say, "Oh, they're all over the store." So we basically went into Whole Foods and a couple of the other chains and said, "We'd like to organize your vegetarian cuisine area. We'd like to be the epicenter to this. but we will organize it with all of our 20 products, a logo over top of them, some shelf racks and pushers and some shelf information, and then alongside stick all the competition so that there became a section in the store the way you see today in Whole Foods. There
Hmm.
is a vegetarian cuisine section. I connected with Peter Roy, who was the president of Whole Foods at that time. He endorsed the concept and brought us into Northern California, where we launched the Vegetarian Cuisine Center of White Wave. In that, there were baked tofu, there were salad dressings, there was a number of different iterations of tofu that were either ready to eat or ready to use at home. It gave us a very strong reputation as an innovator and creator of new and different directions. Um,
Wow.
we we went into the frozen food section with ice cream, with ice cream sandwiches, with chocolate dipped popsicles. So we were well known for innovation, and we differentiated ourselves from everyone else by initiating all of these new products.
Interesting. And that's how you guys stayed on top over all of those years in the category. Um, that's incredible. I had no idea that you guys were instrumental in pioneering vegetarian sections in supermarkets. That's huge.
Well, keep in mind that we had the cow of China for a few years. So we had a vegan delicatessen where we could test things. So we
Mm,
made soy milk, we made almond milk, we made seaweed salads with soy products in it. We made missing egg salad. We made a mock tuna salad. We made everything. We made cheeseless pizzas. We made everything we possibly could and tested it at the deli and then ran it out into the marketplace. So I
hmm.
don't know how many products we developed, and there weren't many of us. I mean, I could use that singularly. I don't know how many products I developed to get it out the door. We were looking for mainstream mainstream entry. We wanted to cross the bridge to be in the average American home. My team
Hmm.
used to say to me, "Do you have a clue as to who the average American is?" And I'd say, "Yeah, I sure do." And that's who we're targeting.
Hmm. Right. So you guys have so you have a reputation for being innovators in the category. You you get this notification that you get the notification that the FDA is about to make this announcement, or that's going to be coming through the pipeline at some point. What do you do to be ready for because the amount of confidence that you guys it seems like you guys had in how this would boost the category seems like it was enormous and more than verified a couple years down the line. But you get the news, and so what do the next 2 years look like of trying to get ready for that moment? And what gave you the confidence that this was gonna take off like a rocket ship just from that one piece of news?
Early in the 90s, I wrote a business proposal, a second business plan, if you will, or a third business plan, talking about the future for the company and where we were going. And we identified the fact that we had been making soy ice cream and a number of other things out of soy milk for a while, and we wanted to enter the soy milk industry. The problem is that to enter the soy milk industry is very expensive. The processing equipment to get a neutral flavored product, let alone the packaging and um, um, cartoning and everything of the finished product, is quite expensive and quite large. It took us until the mid 90s to come up with the access and the resources with which to enter this market. By coincidence, this is the exact same time that the FDA announced it would in the future approve soy as a bona fide cholesterol reducer.
Hmm.
So, after 17 years of beating your head against the wall and the wall finally gives in, you take advantage of, oh my gosh, this is it. This is,
Hmm.
the grand ball that we've been waiting for, and now's the time to run. So we knew I used to open my meetings with the management team constantly with one phrase, and that is, are we prepared for success? Are we in the
Mm-hmm.
position that if this hits, are we going to give it to a larger company, or are we going to be the one that runs with it? And
Mm-hmm.
we began our planning process for success, not for failure. Usually, a small company is always defending itself against failure, which we
Mm-hmm.
did for many years. How are we going to survive? How are we going to survive? I wanted to know, how are we going to thrive? What are
Mm-hmm.
we going to do in the event this happens? Well, the first thing is begin your solicitation of distribution. But maybe more importantly is, what about your supply chain? Are you
Mm-hmm.
capable of keeping up with demand for the natural food? I mean, the mainstream industry. So at that time, we started looking at building our own factories. Well, to build a milk processing plant of scale is a couple $100 million. And we
Mm-hmm.
were doing all of 10 million at the time. So let's be real. We're certainly not going to get into that. But at the same time, to process the soy milk itself, it cost about $8 million a facility. Well, the government at that time, in its infinite wisdom, and I am deeply appreciative of this, initiated a plan where they would loan, if you could prove that you're going to create jobs in the community, they would loan you up to $10 million at 1% interest. And
Whoa.
we ran for it. So we borrowed I think it was $8 million, 8, $9 million, and we put up a soy milk factory and what we called an extraction factory in Utah on the grounds of a dairy, and ran a pipe through the wall, and we paid them to use all of their equipment, and we supplied all of the raw material on the other side of the wall in our own facility. So we began to get the supply chain in place so that we could meet demand. And then we went out and lined up with a much larger company, because at the time, to enter the grocery store chains, it wasn't a question of free fills. It was a question of what was called slotting allowance. So let's just say, and I'll make this up, I want to enter a large chain in on the East Coast, 100 stores or something, and they say, well, it'll cost you $10,000 per SKU, standard
Mm-hmm.
stock keeping unit.
Mm-hmm.
So that would cost us to put our product on $30,000 a chain. So we went out and solicited an investment from the world's largest dairy company at the time, Dean Foods, who had factories that could meet the supply, distribution systems that could take us out into the market, and more
Mm-hmm.
factories that we could put our extraction up next to and run the pipes through. We were ready for the parade. We
Wow.
literally called it the Silk Parade. So we literally planned for success. So the irony is, and it's always 2020 that you learn. When the FDA announced that soy was a bona fide cholesterol reducer, in advance of this, they announced it to the public. When we went into the supermarkets to sell it to them, they said, no slotting allowance. You don't need any, just bring us the product and put it on the shelf. And we didn't need the investment money that we thought we did. It sat in the bank, and we had aligned with a very large company. Well, they were making our competition soy milk by that time, so they didn't want us in their factories. So we were on our own with a big partner, and it became a race to the end zone. And I went around on a whirlwind trip around the country, anywhere from Alaska to Hawaii, all over the continental U.S. I remember going to Cornucopia in Connecticut, and I said, this is going to be the most bodacious product launch the industry has ever seen. And there was probably 12 people sitting around a big conference table, and everybody sitting in their coat and tie, and they're the buyers and all of this. And they said, show us. I said, okay. I took my shoes off and stood up on top of their table and walked back and forth, selling them on the product and how we were going to deliver. And they said, okay, you got the business, but the only thing is, do not out of stock us. If this is going to be huge, do not out of stock us, because we were really um, disrupting the existing soy milk market with the launch of our product. Our product was not out in the dry grocery the way soy milk had been sold up to that date. It was in a refrigerated carton that looked like milk, and we were the only ones in the country that were going to be selling in the refrigerated section right next to milk when the FDA put out their announcement. So the bottom line is we were prepared for success.
I mean, that's a hell of a party that you guys staged. And I have to ask, when you say you took off your shoes and walked across the table selling to them, was that a metaphor or is that literal?
No, literal. I did that.
Oh, I love it.
No, I took my shoes off, climbed up on the chair, and stepped up onto the table. They all had their notepads and their pens on, and they looked at me like I was absolutely crazed. And I
Hmm.
walked back and forth selling the benefits of the product until I finally finished my sales pitch, climbed down and sat in the chair, and they said, "You get the sale."
Wow. Oh my God, that must have been a hell of a pitch. Um,
It's a great story.
that is a great story. I love it. Wow. So, did you have any? So, what? How much of the preparation that you did for the FDA coming down with this decision, and the getting an $8 million loan and all of these things, like how much of those decisions was based? How much of those decisions were based on data, and how much of those decisions were based off of just like a hunch of we've been around this industry for a while and we think this is going to be a big deal?
At the time that all this occurred, the soy industry was pretty small. The biggest segment in the industry was soy milk. The manufacturer value of soy milk in the United States at that time was about $70 million. And we saw this as an opportunity to take a $10 million business and turn it into a $20 million business if we got, 10% of the market share.
Right.
So we were running on business assessment, business opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody was coming towards us and saying, "Hey, kid, I'll give you a real break," and tapping his cigar and saying,
Sure.
"Just follow me." It was all about, this is a rising tide. This is what we've been working for the past decade and 3/4. This is the dream that we believed that we could cross the bridge into mainstream. We would be effectively the second natural foods company to cross the bridge into mainstream. The first one was Celestial Seasonings with their teas.
Mm-hmm.
So we saw an opportunity to mimic how big this market could really be. So we positioned the product with a market disruptor, and that was, everybody else was committed to aseptic packaging. Well, aseptic packaging is very expensive. It is a few $1,000,000. So we knew that our competition couldn't react to us unless we hurt them, because they were committed to the investment in their systems. And we were going to be the young upstart coming along and sticking soy milk in the milk carton. And well, really, that's going to be a fresh product. It's all going to spoil on them. They're going to have a lot of trouble. In fact, it didn't occur. And what we thought was going to be a 2-year lead time that we had to run with it, we ended up with about 3 to 4 years where we ran with the market. So
Mm-hmm.
at the end of our tenure with doing all this and launching soy milk, the industry grew to about 370 million from 70, and we had 315 of it.
Mm-hmm. So, just to connect this to what a lot of brands face today, natural foods as a category has grown immensely. There's a lot of fads that happen. What's big one year might not be big the next. Um, what do you have any advice for brands who are trying to predict, because you guys made a really big bet on this moment and it really paid off. Um, is there any advice that you give to brands that are trying to make a similar bet on whether, probiotics have gotten fairly big, adaptogens are, something that people talk about a lot these days. There's, and I work in this industry, and it seems like almost, I go to a lot of trade shows in which I hear something like, oh, like I didn't know that that was a big thing, and now I see like six brands here selling it. Um, do you have any advice for brands that are trying to spot those moments before they come so they can capitalize on it?
I'm going to go back to where we started about right livelihood
Mm-hmm.
and start with the fact that you have to have a fanatical belief in your product so that it's
Mm-hmm.
only a matter of time before you break through. I never took a business course in my life, but I was committed to learning the business aspects of this, and I was committed to getting this product into mainstream. So we spent all of those years developing new products, developing new products. We were trying to find entry into the consumer's interests. We finally found one with Silk, but it was because we were chasing innovation with with a passion. And
Mm-hmm.
what that led us to is understanding we had a point of differentiation in the marketplace that nobody else had. We
Mm-hmm.
brought disruptive innovation to an existing market, and we literally ran away with the market share. 86% of the market share in soy milk during our tenure was owned by White Wave. 86%. And we were
Mm-hmm.
the last ones to come to market. So it's all about differentiation with a product that has a legitimate benefit and is run by a fanatic.
Mm-hmm. Got you. So, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but let's say, it's not, if I have a probiotic yogurt, it wouldn't be about my belief in this particular flavor of probiotic yogurt. It would need to be a belief in the power of probiotics and healthy gut, and earth can I uh, how on earth can I get this into as many consumer bellies as I possibly can? And I'm going to, throw things at the wall, until I make that happen. And this is what I'm fanatical about. Is that an accurate metaphor for, a product that, might be trying to grow today? Because there's a difference
Well, it's
between
more than a metaphor.
sorry.
It's more than it's more than a metaphor. It's an actual story of what happened after I left White Wave. I started a probiotic company called Good Belly. And the reason that we felt we had a point of differentiation is we had 14 human clinical trials done on the product that
Mhm,
showed it actually had a benefit that the consumer could feel. There are very, excuse me, there are very few products that you can actually feel a difference with. You usually are selling a promise of health,
mhm,
a promise of different, promise of something about the product. This actually had a point of differentiation in it that you could feel it after a certain period of time of consumption. So what you're saying is um, you are looking for some credential that differentiates you from everyone else and some benefit that they can actually embrace and wrap their arms around that's different. It can't just be a cute name. It can't be just a packaging. It can't, it certainly helps if you have first mover advantage. If you're the
mhm,
first one to launch into the category, then you've got the reputation that others don't. I mean, in the burger business now, there's a couple out there that have first mover advantage. It will be very hard to just lodge these companies from first place unless they hurt themselves.
mhm,
So this point of differentiation and a legitimate benefit, it can't just be a strange product. It has to be going all the way back to, is this a product that the intent is the world is better off with rather than without, and it harms no one? Now you got
mhm,
something to be fanatical behind. And if you have the point of differentiation, Now you have an identity that nobody else has. You have something that you have a horse to ride, you have a horse to race with.
Right. I suppose one of the things that comes to mind when I think about some of the brands that I see around the natural food space is I don't necessarily see a lack of passion for what a product can do. You know, I mean, in marketing, there's a lot of hype, of course, and everybody wants to talk about how their product is, you know, the best in its category. But one thing that I noticed in your story is just a real emphasis on, you know, you guys did. It sounds like you guys did so much testing to see, you know, what product was the proper vehicle to actually get people to buy and use it. Because I know, you know, I've certainly seen brand owners who are, you know, fanatical about the health properties of their product, and you know, it it checks out. You know, they have a product that, you know, is super healthy. Their brand is coming from a super honest, earnest place, but the experimentation that you guys did really strikes me as, you know, instead of just being like, we're absolutely, you know, you guys didn't, you know, go fanatical about a gray amorphous jiggling block of tofu. It sounds like you guys went crazy for, you know, like, you know, what is the, you know, you listen to the consumers, and you were really uh gunning strong for, you know, finding different ways that might connect with them, instead of just being like, this is our one flagship thing and we're just absolutely crazy about it and you better like it because it's good for you. Does that make sense? It's
Yeah, of course it
that's what's
does.
really striking me about your
And
story here.
everything that you're describing is absolutely accurate, but I'm going to be a broken record here. We had a fanatical commitment that we knew this product had the possibility of changing the face of vegetable based proteins or any proteins in the world. We're going all the way back to right livelihood. We're talking
Hmm.
about adding personal morality and personal belief to something. And with that personal morality and personal belief, you could take on fanaticism. I mean, sooner or later, as an entrepreneur, you're going to wake up and ask yourself, what am I doing this for? We can
Hmm.
honestly say we're doing this for a higher purpose. So when we started struggling, we couldn't sell it. We said, well, we're leaders. Let's innovate. Let's
Hmm.
find the solution to this. And we were relentless in this over years and years and years until we found the magic bullet. It wasn't really by accident. It was by a process of elimination and innovation over a long
Right.
period of time. But it is rooted in this, we have a mission, we're going to accomplish this. Failure was not an option. Failure, it never existed in our minds. It was just, how
Hmm.
long is this going to take? Because we're committed to this for our careers, our lifetime.
I suppose, and tell me what you think of this. I suppose some the one of the, you know, sort of hurdles that I see a lot of companies running into is if their, you know, particular product, their particular iteration of that product isn't going over well, then they will, you know, often give up hope instead of looking for another way that it could be, another medium or another product or you know, another way of uh, getting their overall mission across. Would you say that that is accurate? Like, do you see companies running into this as well, and instead of innovating, just being frustrated the world doesn't get them?
Sure, all the time. And most of the time, those companies are run by very talented and skilled CEOs and administrators, but not entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs don't
Mm,
know, don't understand non-acceptance. They are inventors, and they're inventing to relentless. I was a fanatic. I mean, I apologized to my children in a public event once for all the bad experimental foods I served them at home. That, so it permeated my entire career, and so did it Pat's. We were um, we would bring our entire team together every quarter, even when we got to be a large company, and we would go over our mission and say, our mission is to fully integrate natural soy into the average American diet. Anybody got suggestions on how they see this occurring? And we were willing to listen. We were willing to experiment. We were willing
Mm,
to launch. We were willing to fail, but we were relentless until it occurred. I once had an investment banker say, if they gave out money for perseverance, you'd be a very wealthy man.
mm. I hear that. Um, so to bring it back to the timeline, so to speak. So um, you guys have prepared um, in some really huge ways for any for the increase that you predicted would come with the FDA passing this down. Um, what was the moment when you realized that, like, oh man, like we're dealing with way more than just you know a, a doubling of the size of this business? Like, what? I'm just super curious as to what that, like, aha, like, oh man, like
Uh,
this is really going to just go nuts.
there's a couple of things that stick out of my mind. They're minor, they're funny little things, but I always believed that I would know we hit what we'll call the big time, the mainstream, when I would see truck drivers drinking the product.
Mm-hmm.
So sure enough, one day I was entering the industrial park where our factory was, and I was passing a truck that had just come and picked up all its soy milk from the plant. And the driver was sitting in his seat drinking a carton of chocolate silk, guzzling it the way you would any pleasure food. And I chuckled to myself and said, this is going to do exactly what we expect it to do.
Mm-hmm.
So it got to the point where we were selling, the order department was giddy because they'd come through the door and say, we just sold truckloads of one flavor, one size to one chain, to one distributor. It came as a flood. We grew 3,000% in under 2 years and ended
Mm-hmm.
up on the Inc. 500 fastest growing private companies in the United States for, I think, 3 years running.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it became a rocket ship ride where I told my team, we're prepared for success, continue preparing for success, and don't look down because
Mm-hmm.
you're going to get to see really big numbers that confuse you. Just don't look down. Just stay focused on what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And it became a thrill ride. It was, don't mess this up.
Mm-hmm. Did you guys, you had almost 2 decades of constant innovation, but with different products. Once you guys really had the rocket ship, did you guys keep innovating in the same way with different products, or was it like, let's hold on to this thing and put as high as we can and put everything into Silk?
Everything went into silk. We continued the tofu company, but it didn't grow the way silk did. The irony was that selling a soy product at Christmas time is like, who cares about anything like this? So we decided in our innovation, we would invent silk nog. Well,
Oh.
Silk Nog, which is obviously a knockoff, Silk Nog went out and became one of the top, probably two or three brands in the entire United States that were selling any form of nog because we got full distribution we were in at that time, or by that point we were in 96% of the supermarkets in the United States. So we launched Nog because we didn't have any business from Thanksgiving through until New Year's, and we launched a rocket ship. We
So
we continued to innovate. We continued to innovate with, we branded the product by color, and we got you into the stores by introducing you to chocolate, then vanilla, then plain, and then unsweetened. Our goal
mhm,
was to deliver to you unsweetened product. So we stayed narrowly focused on those flavors plus nog, and then we just kept pushing the delivery aspect to it. We went after the school systems in several states.
mhm,
We stayed narrowly focused as a bullet rather than a shotgun when we finally came up against a true racehorse.
Gotcha. And just to talk about marketing, you said I've heard you say before that the government really helped do a lot of the marketing for you. Um, Now, that said, did you guys reinvest a lot of this newfound capital into marketing to help support that? Um, or was it really just a hyper focus on having the supply chain of not stocking out and of having the quality remain high? Was that where all the efforts went, or were there marketing efforts to sort of supplement what was, happening with this larger wave?
Well, when we had the confidence behind us, which we got very quickly, that we could meet the demand, then we could go out and stir the pot and create it. So we
Mm,
had no quality problems, and we were 98% in stock of product during the height of this. So the media, when the government announced that it was going to support the claim, the health claim for soy, the media picked this up everywhere. So you couldn't pick up a newspaper without it showing, the benefits of soy and the consumption of soy. So we had no advertising to do. We didn't no education to do. We didn't need to educate the public. What we did, because we were placed in so many of the stores out there, we went to NPR because we felt that that was the educated consumer. That was who we were trying to reach. And we sponsored All Things Considered. And
mm,
we sponsored one slogan, and that is Silk is Soy. Silk is Soy. We let the media advertise all the reasons that people should be consuming soy. All we wanted to do was convince you that this is the product that you heard about,
right.
which which we ultimately did because anecdotally years later I heard that Jeopardy, the TV show, had one of their questions on it that said, "What is the last word of this silk is?" So we clearly got to the really made me laugh. We clearly got to the mainstream with, if you're looking for soy, this is the product that you're looking for. Now,
Mm,
after we hit the big time, I mean, the really big numbers in the hundreds of millions, we started hiring marketing agencies and doing TV commercials. We hired some of the
mhm,
top agencies in the country for doing TV commercials, radio commercials, and we were, several $100 million in business. So
mhm.
we were pushing big, and we were using all of the media at that point to. We wanted to grow it to $1 billion brand. That was our target.
Right, right. And wow. So, but what about, but in say those first 2 years when you were growing so fast, I suppose you might
Yeah.
have not even had a need uh, to invest in marketing if you're already growing so quickly um, that you're getting into
No.
the Fortune
It's
500.
our investment was in quality control. We
Mm,
we we were. Remember, I told you that we had no competition because the other companies couldn't make a move until we hurt them. Well, it wasn't our
mhm,
intent to hurt them. We just had such a lead on them that they didn't respond in a timely fashion. So it wasn't a question of whether we could dominate the market. It was a question of, could we keep up with the market, and could we do so with no out of stocks and no quality issues. So our first investment was in quality assurance, and that was to protect, obviously, the brand image and the achievements that it had gotten to. Then we
mhm.
kept pushing it to get into more and more average American homes. That, remember the mission.
Right.
I'm such a broken record. It was so consistently back to the root of
Mhm,
what we did, and we stayed with that commitment all the way out until the end.
mhm. Did your strategy change change much once the competition did start to get wise, and started to create products that were a little closer to what you guys had.
86% market share, you don't have to do a whole lot other than hold on to it. You're not going to grow your market. Yeah, I mean, you're not going to grow much higher than that.
Yeah.
Don't mess it up. Keep delivering to the consumer. The brand name was brilliant. The packaging was right on target. We knew from, this is an interesting piece, we knew from the missing children campaign in the milk industry from years before that while the campaign didn't last very long because people got upset at the breakfast table, what it said was the milk carton is one of the few packages that ends up on the table. So I
Hmm.
went back to marketing and I said, you cannot advertise any other white wave product on the silk carton, and your job is to sell the product, sell the package regardless of what's in it. So we had a second product, and that was entertainment. We began delivering information on the early cartons, that science information, nature information, comedy, anything that we could come up with, puzzles, that
Mm.
we would fill the carton because we knew people were using it at the table, spinning it around and reading it. So now we were delivering the highest quality product in our minds, the highest quality product on the market, but we were delivering something above what everybody else was delivering. It wasn't
Hmm.
try my other stuff. It was, that's funny, that's informative, that's interesting. So my goal was to always be the highest priced product on the market, and we would deliver the highest premium quality product and package that were in the
Hmm.
marketplace. We were going to uh, intrigue people with all of that. But there was an added caveat in our right livelihood commitment, good for everything that it touches. We had to be giving back to the community. So
Hmm.
we initiated social responsibility in 96 when we launched Silk. And we began giving back a percentage of our revenues to Amnesty International, the Susan G. Komen Fund, the AIDS Project, the Boulder Community Homeless Shelter, um, food aid. So we weren't advertising this, but we were communicating it. So we were representing to the consumer something on a larger scale that they believed in. So not
Hmm.
only were we giving a product, not only were we giving a package, but we were giving back. And we were representing them on a level that we were significant in those contributions because we were at such scale. That is going to garner brand loyalty. That's going to give the holy grail of consumer packaging. When you represent for the consumer their belief system on a larger scale than they can achieve as an individual, they're going to support you. So if it was organics, we've never been anything other than organic since 1977. Non-GMO, that's silly. That there was there was no such thing at that point. But we were socially responsible, going back to our roots. Our halo was bright, and we didn't advertise it, but we certainly wouldn't shy away from it when we were asked, and we did let people know indirectly that we're contributing to these causes.
That's just phenomenal. It's just absolutely phenomenal. Um,
Right livelihood.
yeah, no, I
I
love it. I love it.
broken about it. It's so encompassing as an operating business philosophy. Remember the goal. It was not soy. It was to demonstrate that this operating business philosophy was a superior form of capitalism.
No,
It garnered brand loyalty, garnered quality, it garnered innovation in packaging, all of that.
and I mean, I'm really glad that you are reiterating it, reiterating how, every step of this, really connects back to that because, as somebody who, owns a mission driven business that works with a lot of mission driven businesses or businesses in which the mission is at least important enough to make it, front and center to how they want to communicate to the world and to their consumers. It's really easy to see, um, the mission either just sort of gets sidelined, or it's just like it's a nifty thing, right? It's, something that's,
Oh,
baked into it enough,
I called it a bolt.
but sorry.
I called it a bolt-on. Social responsibility became a bolt-on. I've got to look
Yeah.
good, so I'm going to advertise the fact, aren't I a nice guy? I'm helping. It's almost as bad as a cigarette company saying, well, we donate to the Cancer Institute. I mean,
Well,
as silly as it sounds, that is a bolt-on social responsibility. We tried to connect our social responsibility on an international level, a national level, and a local level consciously, and tried to connect it to the product. So Susan G. Komen was all about breast cancer awareness, and we had a product that was healthier. At the time, it was respected to be an antidote, if you will, to the early onset of breast cancer. So we were taking the product, and literally its revenue stream was supporting the things that it affected: health, nutrition,
mhm.
well-being.
I hear you. I suppose one of the things that I see a lot of bolt-ons. I also see a lot of really well-meaning entrepreneurs who
Yep,
simply get wrapped up in the day-to-day realities of we got to stay alive.
yep,
And I mean, that's a tough thing when, when you're setting off with good intentions, and it's easy for those to get lost in the mix of there never being enough time in the day for, what's already on your plate. Um, do you have any do you have any tips for um, entrepreneurs or business owners out there um, who have all the good intentions, and they want to keep informing their business decisions but are struggling with the financial realities? Do you have any words of wisdom for them?
yeah, I absolutely do. Um, uh, the fact of the matter is that their first and foremost responsibility as a business owner is to be standing tomorrow. They
Hmm.
have a purposeful business. It's a beneficial product. They're in alignment with the qualities of right livelihood. Well, so did we. We were 17 years before we were making any money.
Hmm.
And it was all about, are we still furthering the mission? Well, yeah, but we can't complete every aspect of it unless we're making a living. It has to be, I mean, right livelihood is good for me, good for you, good for everything it touches. It has to be good for me before I can give you anything.
Hmm.
So,
Yep.
be patient with making it right. Get your business skills in place. It's not just well intended. You can't be just goody two shoes. You have
Hmm.
to have good intent. You have to have good disciplines. You have to have good actions. You have to have good product. All of this has to be in alignment. And you have to be standing tomorrow as a for profit business. But what are you going to do with that once you get it? Well, don't worry about what you're going to do with it before you get it, but be focused on the fact of our intentions are clear, our mission is well stated, and if it ever happens to us that we gain in abundance, then fine, I'll share it. But the most important thing is, do I have a product or a service that people are benefiting from? And that's enough. You don't need any more than that. If you have abundance, then you have a moral responsibility to give back to the community that you've extracted from. But your
Hmm.
first and foremost responsibility is deliver the benefit of your product.
Right. So have it all baked so integrally into the product or service that any success that the product has or the service has is success for the mission as well.
That's exactly correct. I can't emphasize enough the consistency with the root, the consistency with the intent, the consistency with the mission statement actually being a living entity. You are breathing life into something, not just slapping it up on a wall and saying, gee, see what we stand for, aren't we cute? That's ego boasting. If you're
Hmm.
breathing life into the thing, it will come to you most likely, but it's going to take some time. It took us a lot longer than probably a sane person would ever tolerate, but we did. And when it came to us in abundance, then it was time to give back. And I call this wealth without guilt. We're shameless in having made money in right livelihood because we shared it all the way up and down the line with
Mm-hmm.
our employees, with ourselves, with our supply chain. We used wind energy. We gave back to the community. We walked our talk.
Right. So here's a question. How do you do you have any tips for attracting um, or looking for mission-driven employees? Because everybody, green is very trendy. It's one thing to pay lip service. It's another to believe in it with such a passion that it's going to, keep it's going to keep you going that extra mile when something's on the line.
Yeah, the hardest part of business from my perspective is not the product, not the marketing, not the challenges of all of that. It's managing people
Mm,
because everybody has a mind, has an opinion, has feelings, and they all have to be respected. But at the same time, they all have to be brought into alignment with the company. So I don't think you ever see a person's true value to the company for 6 months, because
mm,
coming in the door, it's all judgment. It's all first impressions. And everybody's on stage. If they're coming in as a potential employee, they're going to show their best stuff. They're going to show they're in alignment with philosophy. They're going to show they love the product. I mean, come on, that they're doing the dance to get hired. The reality is it'll take 6 months. So so from the employer's side, you're following your gut instinct in terms of the person sitting in front of you that says, I'm green. I'm all about, changing the planet. Well, great. We all are. Without any
mm-hmm,
sarcasm, yes, I appreciate that. Now, tell me what your skills are and what do you think you're bringing to this business? What
mm-hmm,
is it that you bring business that I can't find anywhere else? Um, that sort of puts people on the spot, but it's not intended to. But you're trying to save yourself from an awkward situation 6 months from now when you go, oh my God, I've got the wrong person in the wrong job.
mm-hmm,
We were pretty good at culling through, and we made plenty of mistakes, but we got fantastic people around us, and we treated them with respect. So, I used to say in business, every company needs a yes no person at the top. That we're going to do this, we're not going to do this, but that person better take advice from everybody who's going to offer it. And I would say, if you can outthink me, I will change on a dime. If
mm-hmm,
your logic is more appropriate than mine, if your idea is more appropriate than mine, and I demonstrated this in meetings, you're right, your thinking is clearer than mine, we're changing, we're going in a different direction. So it is about leadership, and its toughest part is leading people, particularly if you're a young entrepreneur and you've got no experience in it. Stay close to your mission, be sincere, be straightforward and transparent, and when you have to make a hard decision, make a hard decision.
mm-hmm. What is a pitfall other companies run into that you feel like you avoided?
Well, number one, we plan for success. I mean, I know that this sounds a little bit trite, but the fact of the matter is, most entrepreneurs, including myself, at some point, my house was leveraged. I was afraid,
Mm-hmm,
but nonetheless, we persevered with we will go forward with this. So, um, staying in the positive, seeing the opportunities to go forward with. Um, uh, Number two is that we never took on investment until way late in the game, and it was very little, so that we weren't diluting, and just using money as our lever to succeed. We were using
mm,
innovation, hard work, and smarts. So ultimately, when Cinderella time showed up, and the company was monetized, the management team owned uh, 2/3 of the company
Hmm.
or more. That's a rarity in small companies because they're constantly going back to the responsibility to them. They're going to start directing the direction of your business, what you're launching, how you're acting. We didn't have to do that. I was a dictator. I believe
Hmm.
I was a benefic dictator, but I was a dictator because we had the equity. We were in control. We hadn't given up that control. So the combination of being in control and planning for success gave us a long runway, and we took advantage of
All right. What's the next big step for you?
it. um,
What comes
I've
next
been
for
out
Steve
of the
Demos?
industry for I've been out of the industry for almost 15 years, and I am now looking at re-entering some aspect of the food industry because the things that we predicted in 1977 are timely and have come of age at this point. So without getting into specifics, it looks like I'm probably going to try and start something new.
Oh, interesting. Very interesting. I look forward to hearing more about that. But for now, I'll just finally ask, where can our listeners find you?
Uh, you can find me on internet, on email. I like mentoring with young entrepreneurs who meet the criteria of right livelihood. I'm not a consultant. I'm not a business. I have a great passion for right livelihood, and I recognize entrepreneurs who have the passion and the fanaticism that I had, and I'm happy to help them. So I'm gonna give something away here that I may regret someday, but my email is steve@gmail.com, and if you've got a business and you have questions, email me. I won't ever show up at a meeting. I won't go out of my way to do things, but I'll help wherever I can, and you never know what it would grow into.
So I think the audio glitched for a second there. Could you say that again? Just the email portion of it.
Steve.demus, Demos, @gmail.com. And tell me your business because if it's not right livelihood, if you're selling intoxicants, if you're selling armaments, if you're taking life, if you're in the animal business, I wish you the best, but I can't help you. If you are bringing something that has no violence connected, it is not exploitive of the earth, and you are genuinely a fanatic, you are an entrepreneur looking to promote your stuff, I am willing to help you on structure and systems. I don't ever get into what your product is. That's your business.
Okay. Um, Thank you so much for your time. It's immensely appreciated. There's so many lessons to be learned from your journey and the success that the companies you've built have had. And I just from the bottom of my heart, thank you for being here.
Well, I'm very appreciative. I admire the fact that there's an era coming about now where all of this stuff that the pioneers started, and I was one of them, and there are many others, the Peter Roys, the Doug Greens, the Drake Sadlers of the world. I'm really happy to see this come of age and that we are, in fact, changing the world. So I encourage young entrepreneurs that no matter how hard it is, if you followed all the principles that we were talking about, it will happen. It will work for you. You just have to wait for it to come of time. So thanks a lot. I'm honored to have been able to participate.
All right. Um, that's just uh, this is just so much fun. Oh, here we go. We got a friend showing up. um, what's the cat's name?
Yeah, I'm kidding. Barkley. Barkley is a Maine Coon cat. I live on a farm now that I have outside of Boulder, and I've been collecting animals because what I want to do is ground myself and root myself. So I have collected miniature animals, goats, horses, donkeys, pigs, and I have chickens, turkeys, cats, and dogs. And I don't eat them, I don't train them, and I don't work them. They're pets, they're
You hang out?
friends.
That's
So
amazing.
you just saw Bart. That's what I do is I hang out with animals right now.
Very cool. All right. Well, thanks again, and looking forward to the next time. This is the Eco DDC podcast signing off.